he's in charge of like their media and stuff. Well, should be starting. Here we go. All right. Hey, Mr. Manfred, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're good to go then.
Okay. All right. Well, my name is Sam Vincent, and we have this sports and American culture class. We have about 50 students here who are excited to hear from you and talk to you and ask you some questions.
Okay.
If you're not able to, it's okay. We can't see you. I don't know if you're able to turn a camera on. There we go. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
I thought it was on. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Well, if this works for you, what we typically have done in the past is if you'll take maybe a minute or two to talk about kind of your life, career, how you got to where you are, and then I'll hand it over to the kids and they'll fire away if that works for you.
Yep, that's great.
All right. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So they've asked me to say just a word or two about how I got here. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, was very fortunate, went to Cornell for college and then on to Harvard Law School. After law school, I went into private practice with a large law firm in Washington, D.C. About 3 or 4 years into my career, Major League Baseball came to the firm as a client. I literally got assigned to work on the client. It had nothing to do with any relationship I had with baseball. It was just like any other assignment for a client. Over the next 10 years, I spent the bulk of my time in private practice representing baseball in a variety of matters. I worked on collective bargaining negotiations with the players in both 1990 and during the strike in 1994. Formed a relationship with my predecessor, Commissioner Seelig. Late in the 90s, 1998, they approached me about coming in-house as the labor person. I took that job, moved to New York, did 3 labor deals for baseball. While I was in that role, later during that period of time, Commissioner Seelig started to expand my role into other areas, media and whatnot. I eventually was appointed COO in 2012 and then was elected commissioner in 2014.
All right. Perfect. The kids researched a little bit about you, so that kind of refreshed them a little bit.
Okay.
I know one of the things, and then I'm going to turn it over to the kids, is what's kind of a typical day like for you as the commissioner? What is a typical day, if there is one, for the commissioner of a sports league?
Well, I think that I'm not sure there is a typical day, but over time, over a week, the way I think about it is this: about half my time is spent on what the COO or the CEO of a normal business would handle. Media rights issues, the part of our business where we sell retail products to fans. Right now we're spending a bunch of the regional sports networks are in bankruptcy. A bunch of time dealing with that. About half the time goes into those general business matters. Another 25% of the time is related to what I think of as governance, meaning the relationship between this office and the individual teams, disciplinary matters, the enforcement of rules that govern how the game's played on the field and how the business is conducted off the field. And then another 25% is just kind of owner relationship issues. There's 30 of them, one of me. So even if, 20% of them call in a day, that's, takes a significant chunk of my time.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we're going to have the kids, they're mostly 10th through 12th graders, ask you questions and they'll
Great.
introduce themselves and we'll go from there. So we're going to start with a senior baseball player we have here, Kaden Parker, and then we'll just kind of go around from there.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Manfred. My name's Kaden. I'm a shortstop for the baseball team. And I know you're from New York, so I just wanted to know what you thought the Yankees are going to do this year.
Yeah, well, can I tell you something? I'm not much on the prediction business when it comes to teams. I did grow up a Yankee fan. It's hard to, obviously I'm neutral when it comes to the 30 teams, but it's hard to forget how you grew up as a fan. So I'm going to be rooting for them. Obviously, when the Yankees are good, it's good for our business as well, which is a good thing. They got some great players. I think it's going to be a question of how they all fit together for the Yankees.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Anybody have one next? All right, Colin.
Hello, sir. My name's Colin. I play for the baseball team, and I was wondering if you're familiar with Angel Hernandez, the umpire.
I am.
And I was wondering, how do you deal with this, how much he gets scrutinized, and how does he still have a job over how many mistakes he's made?
Well, Angel's an interesting case with the umpires. With respect to all umpires, more goes on behind the scenes in terms of trying to make sure that they perform at the quality level that we expect of our umpires. Angel's situation has been complicated by the fact that he has been a litigant. As you may know, when you have somebody who sues under discrimination laws, you have to be very careful about how they're treated to avoid claims that you've retaliated against them for suing. I think that the larger picture, his litigation turned out to be unsuccessful. The larger picture with Angel is to try to get him on a path where he performs at the level that we expect of Major League umpires.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Anybody? No people have questions. Go ahead. Sincere.
How's it going, sir? My name's Sincere Robinson.
Nice
I
to
would
meet
like to ask you, what is one game that you've seen in your job that has really moved you during the game? You really enjoyed watching?
Yeah, I think that I can think of a couple. The end of the 2001 World Series. The 2001 World Series, was special in its own right because of the proximity to 9/11. The night President Bush threw out a pitch in Yankee Stadium, and Game 7 in that World Series was an absolute classic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more recently, the one I would point to is the final of the World Baseball Classic last year. I think the showdown between Trout and Ohtani was about as dramatic as you can get in a baseball game. And, probably more importantly, I think that that game and the tournament as a whole, I think showed the potential for the development of baseball as a truly international sport.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right.
Hey, Mr. Manfred, my name's Landon, and my question was, who do you think the greatest baseball player of all time is?
That's a pretty good one. Look, I think it's really hard to pick out an individual player. I think that if I were forced to make that call, it'd come down to two guys. I think Henry Aaron and Willie Mays were just absolutely phenomenal all-around players. and certainly would be in that category. I guess the caveat I would put on that, when Ohtani's body of work is complete, he may be the best ever.
I agree. All right. Thank you for that.
Hi, Mr. Manfred.
I was wondering if there are any women in this class, so I'm glad to see.
My name is Kennedy Porter, and my dad's been a baseball coach for years, so I grew up on baseball. And my question for you is, how is the MLB continuing to become more diverse as females are now getting coaching jobs and are getting office positions?
Yeah, look, I think that diversity, particularly off the field. I mean, I think about it in two buckets: on the field, off the field. So let me talk about both of them for just a second. When I became commissioner 10 years ago, we spent almost no money on youth development. That's changed dramatically. We've made a heavy investment in getting young people playing the game because it's good for our business. It grows fans. But an important aspect of that youth effort has been providing playing opportunities in underserved areas. Right now, we have about 8% of our players in the big leagues are African American. Our draft the last 5 years in the early rounds has been about 20%. Almost all of that increase is from players who have participated in Major League Baseball sponsored programs, from Urban Youth Academies to the Dream Series. We just have a whole panoply of programs where we develop more diversity. Off the field is more complicated because it's not only racial diversity, but it's gender diversity as well. Again, the key for us, it has been starting at the grassroots level. We're focused on recruiting more minorities into the game, more women into the game. We've made real progress, particularly on the gender front. I think people like, Kim Ang worked for me here for almost a decade. There was a lot of development that went on with respect to Kim that put her in a position to be the first female GM. And the great thing you see is when you get a woman GM, you then see her hiring more women in baseball operations jobs. And that's a really important feature of our efforts in this area.
All right, thank you.
Let's go, Rudy. Your turn.
All right. Well, the next person's coming up. I'm going to ask a question here. Can you kind of speak on the rule changes from last year, and are there any more rule changes on the horizon, and kind of how they affected Major League Baseball?
All right. Well, let me start. I think that the first and most important thing to say is that, we have a deep respect for the history and traditions of the game, and the history and traditions of our sport makes change difficult. When we undertook the program to think about how we were playing the game on the field, there were two important things. Number one, we felt like we were embarking on a program that was not changing the sport, but putting it back to its best form, the form that a lot of people grew up loving, number one. And number two, we were committed to the idea that we needed to be very careful with the change that we undertook. Most important thing is we played 8,000 games in minor league baseball with the rule changes that we implemented last year. Those 8,000 games gave us a lot of confidence that we knew these rule changes were going to work and what the outcome was going to be. The whole focus of the rule changes was to be responsive to fundamental fan research about what they wanted to see from the game. The package of changes worked together. The combination of the pitch clock, the elimination of shifts, and the larger bases shortened the game, removed dead time, put more action in the game, and focused on the athleticism of our great players. Those changes research show, very popular with fans. But more importantly, we drew 70 million people last year into Major League ballparks for the first time in almost a decade. As a mentor of mine used to say, the best validation of a change is when people vote with their feet. And we felt like our fans voted with their feet last year.
Gotcha. All right. Anybody?
Hello, my name is Nate. So as you know, we're from Parkersburg High School in West Virginia, and so when it comes to professional teams, we don't have any. So what do you think the chances would be that we could ever get a professional sports team?
Yeah, look, we think about baseball as a growth business, and there are markets around the United States that are anxious for, and I believe could support baseball. And as a result, we've had ongoing conversations about expansion. So I think there will be more teams and markets going forward, and that's an opportunity for anybody who wants baseball. I think the difficulty with our sport is that because we play so many home games, 81 home games, you really need a certain population size in order to support a major league team. You ask a lot of fans to go to ballpark 81 times, and to fill that ballpark 81 times, you need a pretty big population base.
All right, thank you.
I'm back. I just thought of another question to ask
Okay.
you. Are you able to make like any personal connections with any of the baseball players?
I have a program that I embarked upon a couple of years ago where I go out and meet with players away from the ballpark on every team during the season. So that means more than once a week. Think about it. Our season's 26 weeks, got 30 teams. That means more than once a week I'm out meeting with players. I purposely set these meetings up away from the ballpark so that it's, there's not club people around. It's just me and the players. I follow up those meetings often with text exchange with individual players. I think it's really important to try to give players a feel for who I am and what I'm thinking about the game on the one hand, and maybe more important, to learn what they're thinking about the game. And things that you learn in these exchanges with players, really do change what we're intending to do from a policy perspective. I give you a great example. We have invested significant sums in developing an automated ball strike system. The way it works is the computer actually, calls the ball in strike. There's an earpiece in the umpire's ear, and he just calls what the system tells him to call. We embarked on this system with the idea that, before I talk about it, the technology of this system is phenomenal. It's accurate to 1/100th of an inch. It will call whatever strike zone you define. So if you wanted to call a rectangle, you tell it that's the rectangle. Right now, umpires kind of call an oval shaped strike zone. You want it to call an oval, you just define the oval, and that's what it's called, what it calls. We thought that this system would be wildly popular with players because every game you see players complaining about balls and strikes. I got a question about one of our umpires who has a difficult time with balls and strikes, and it's a source of controversy in the game. As you go out and talk to players, you realize there are other considerations besides just accuracy. One of the things players raise is certain types of players would be eliminated if you had an automated ball strike system. The most obvious one is the quote unquote framing catcher. There are, a whole group of major league players who are major league players because they know how to frame a pitch. If the system is going to call what the system calls, regardless of framing, those framing catchers go away, and a more offensive, a player with more offensive skills will take that position. And, hearing this from players makes you think through the kind of unintended consequences of a change you might make.
I gotcha. Are you trying that stuff in like the minor leagues? I'm pretty sure I saw a video on that somewhere.
Yeah, the ABS system is used throughout the minor leagues. We use it two different ways that we're experimenting with. One form, every single pitch gets called by the system and the umpire just relays the call. It looks the same to the fan. The other system is a challenge system. The pitcher, the catcher, and the hitter all have the right to challenge a pitch. They just make a signal. The umpire instantaneously is told by the system what the right answer is, and the game moves on. If the challenge is correct, you keep your challenge. If the challenge is incorrect, you lose your challenge. Early returns are players prefer the challenge system to the full ABS system.
That's pretty cool. Well, thank you.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Manfred, I got another question. So with all the players that we're getting from Japan, like, what is the skill gap between the MLB and the league over there?
Yeah, you ask the Japanese, they would answer that question 0.
Yeah.
We have kind of the perfect relationship with Japanese baseball. Because we're an everyday game, we're not going to ever play regular season games in Japan. It's just too damn far away. Yeah. And so, it's important for the growth of the game that they have a really healthy domestic product that plays at a high level, and they do have that. We have a set of agreements in place with the Japanese league that essentially allows their very best players the opportunity to come here and play. And why does that benefit both leagues? It benefits us because, we get the very best players from Japan. It drives our business here. It drives our business in Japan. It helps the Japanese league because most of their talent stays there and promotes a great domestic product. But it also drives interest in the game because people in Japan love to see Ohtani, for example, be the best player in the major leagues. I think the very best Japanese players are obviously as good as the players here. I think we are deeper in terms of talent than the Japanese professionals.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Isaiah. I was wondering how you think baseball is turning into a more social and media age.
Well, I think that the changing media environment may be one of the most challenging business issues for us. This is an issue we've been on for a very long time. People forget that the first digital over-the-top direct-to-consumer product ever was MLB.TV, our outer market package. Nobody sold content of that volume to consumers in an over-the-top form until MLB.TV started. As we have moved on, we've developed a real presence on social media. If you went downstairs in this office, you'd see about 60 people who spend all their time posting on various platforms, making sure that we're reaching fans where they're spending their time. That may be the most important effort of all, that is being on platforms where people want to be. And the third piece of it is developing, really technology tools that allow the development of interesting social content. Like StatCast is an example of that. The development of information about what's going on the field that gives fans a deeper understanding. We develop that kind of information primarily for its use in social media. Last is players. Obviously, maybe the most attractive part of social content is when you get players giving fans insight into what they do off the field, who else they are, what's their personality. That's what fans want. And so we have a whole program around social media for players where we provide them with kind of ready-made clips that they can use on-field highlights to then expand and give fans some insight into what they're thinking about the game or what they're doing away from the field.
All right, thank you.
Hello, Mr. Manfred. I'm back.
Hi.
So, I wanted to ask about like the current payroll differences between teams. Like, let's say, the Dodgers yearly payroll is around 300 million, and the Athletics is around 40 million. And I was wondering, if you think there's an issue between the difference there.
Yeah, look, I'd say two things. Empirically, we have had tremendous competitive balance in the game. We haven't had a repeat World Series champion in a couple of decades.
Mhm.
Last year you had a pretty high payroll team, the Rangers, and a pretty low payroll team, the Diamondbacks, in the World Series. Having said that, I do believe that payroll disparity affects the competitive character of the game. And I do believe that payroll disparity affects fan perception of the fairness of the competition. Those are big issues for us. I think longer term, you will see baseball move to the kind of model that you see in other sports. I think one of the things that's important in business is, don't get too caught up on the details. And I think that in this context, what I mean by that is, you have 4 major professional sports in the United States. 3 of them do it one way with a salary cap. We do it a different way. At some point, you got to ask yourself the question, do those 3 sports have it wrong and you got it right? Or do you have it wrong and do they have it right?
Yeah, I see. Thank you, sir.
Ask a question and then someone else. All right. This is a question I know they want asked, but no one's walking up to ask it. So it's kind of 2 in 1. Locally, a lot of people are Reds fans. So Pete Rose is obviously a big name. And then yesterday we just had the Baseball Hall of Fame selection. And obviously in baseball's history, the steroid era, a lot of those guys are left out. Do you see Pete Rose or Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, anything changing in that regard? Or where do you see the future for that?
Yeah, I think they're different issues. Rule 21, which is the rule that prohibits gambling on baseball by players, coaches, anyone involved on the field, is the bedrock of our sport because it relates to the fairness and integrity of the competition. I believe that when you violate that fundamental rule, you should never be allowed to work in the game. And that's, again, it's just, you should be banned from the sport. And I think, Pete Rose is probably the quintessential example of why you should be banned from the sport, because even, as of the last time I interviewed him, which was not that long ago, Pete was still betting on baseball. You can't let him back in the game, okay? When I wrote about his last application for reinstatement, I drew a distinction. And what I said is, my responsibility is to protect the integrity of the game. In terms of protecting the integrity of the game, the way you do that with Pete Rose is you leave him on the permanently ineligible list. I think the problem with Rose arises, and I wrote this, the considerations as to whether he belongs on that ineligible list and therefore is unable to work in the game are different than whether he ought to be in a museum, which is what the Hall of Fame is. Unfortunately, the Hall of Fame, which we don't control, it's an independent entity. I am on the board, but there's 21 people on the board, not just me, has decided that their eligibility should be parallel to our permanently ineligible list. When I wrote the last time, I said, I think that's a bad idea. I think they ought to rethink that because the considerations for eligibility to work in the game are different than the considerations for eligibility to work in a museum. So far, nobody's taken me up on that suggestion, okay? And it stays where it stays. The steroid guys, I see differently. That's not an eligibility question. The steroid guys, and the Hall of Fame, I think is actually in the right place. They're eligible. And the baseball writers who vote on whether you get into the Hall of Fame have the right, the ability to evaluate the careers of these players as a whole. On the positive side, there's some really good numbers. On the negative side, there's this doubt about how those numbers were achieved and whether they were achieved in a way that's quote unquote fair to compare them to other players. And, I think over time, the writers have made judgments about things that have gone on in different eras, and that over time they've made good judgments, but those judgments have changed periodically. So, you may see some change in that area, but they're really different cases. One is a pure eligibility question. If I had my way, the Hall of Fame would make Pete Rose eligible, let the voters vote once and for all and decide whether he belongs in or not. The steroid guys, they're eligible. The question is, given all of their conduct and the criteria for the Hall of Fame, should they be in or should they be out? And that's up to the writers. That's where I think it should be decided.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I think we have time for like one. Pearson. Good.
All right. Be a good one, Pearson. Hey, my name's Pearson, and
Hi,
I was just wondering, with Anthony Rendon of the Angels coming out and saying the season should be shorter, have you really thought about maybe shortening the season or anything? Like, how did you feel about going about that?
Yeah, there's periodic conversations about shortening the season. The number that most people like is 154 because that's what we used to play before we went to 162. There's economic ramifications for that. You're giving up gates and you got less content to broadcast. Having said that, we ask a lot of players. We play 162 games in 186 days. You do the math, right? That's 24. But a lot of those 24 days are not really off days. They're travel days. When I travel on business, I don't think it's an off day. I'm traveling, right, for business. So it's a very rigorous schedule, and you could see where making a trade where you shortened the regular season, maybe altered your playoff format a little bit, could be economically viable.
Sweet. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Vincent, I'm okay. Are we at our? I got one more.
Listen, this is a far-fetched thing, but it's been my dream to go to Yankee Stadium my whole life. Is there any way you could send 2 tickets to the high school?
2 Yankees. I'll tell you what. I'll make you a deal. Okay. You tell me when you can get yourself to New York. I'll get you 2 tickets to Yankee.
I can go whenever. Whenever.
Just pick a game that you want to go to, and I can get you tickets to any game. Pick a game you want to go to, send me a date, and I'll get you the ticket.
Yankees versus Cardinals.
Yankees versus?
Yankees Cardinals. At
Okay.
Yankee Stadium.
All right. Send me look, my email's really easy. It's rob.manfred@mlb.com. It's my first name,
Awesome.
.manfred@mlb.com. Look at the
Awesome.
schedule. Tell me the date, and I'll send you the tickets.
Thank
Get me
you. Go
in-
Yankees.
All right. Thank you.
You're gonna have 50 students emailing you now asking for
You
tickets.
can tell them to
Yeah.
save it because I'm only doing the tickets
Yeah, right.
once.
Yeah. Real quick. A few years ago, we had a student who said the last question should be, if you were going to give one piece of advice to these high school kids, what would you give?
Yeah. Look, the best advice I can give you, particularly if you want to work in sports, is find yourself an area of expertise, whether it's being a lawyer, an accountant, a marketing person. Develop expertise. Working in sports is not a career goal. You got to decide what the heck you want to do in sports.
Okay. Well, hey,
All right.
thank you so much. And be on the lookout for an email from Kaden Parker here. So,
I will indeed. Thank you.
all right. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There's no.